This is going to be so much fun. It is a complete departure from anything that we have done before, and it's going to be so personal. It's all about you, and it's about me. It's about all of us and what our gardens say about us, what my garden says about me, and what does your garden say about you. But more importantly, we have to know about ourselves to know how our gardens reflect our personality traits. So in the spirit of September, getting to know ourselves better, every week I'm going to be presenting to you with a free test, quiz, personality inventory, or something that you can take that will give you such information. Now, some of you may be familiar with these because you may have done them in the past. For example, our first one is the Myers-Briggs Interest Inventory. This is something that I used to use all of the time when I was still working with college-age kids, and they would take this interest inventory. But I haven't done it in probably 30 years. So I just took it yesterday, and I got my results. You guys, we're putting a link right here, and we're putting a link in the description box. But if you don't have the link, all you have to do is just Google it, and a free link, a free quiz link will come up, and you can find out what your results are. And it will give you a certain amount of in-depth analysis based on what the quiz told it about you. So what my garden says about me based on my Myers-Briggs results, drum roll please, okay, and then you guys tell me what yours are and we'll compare notes. I am an ENFJ-T, and basically what that means in terms of my personality and my garden, it states, your garden mirrors the deeply empathetic, visionary, and community-oriented traits of an ENFJ. Just as you naturally bring people together and nurture meaningful connections, your garden creates a welcoming, inclusive space where beauty is intentionally designed to make others feel at home. Yeah, but the Myers-Briggs didn't give me this information. What I did was I took the results and I just put them in a free version of AI. I just put them into ChatGPT, and I said, analyze these results relative to how I am as a gardener. Now, for me, that was a little bit easier because I have a public persona online that talks about my gardening style and things like that. All you'd have to do is just give it a brief overview of how you like to garden. You only want to garden for pollinators with natives in a very loose style. You like to garden in these months. Just give it an overview. The more information you feed it, based on your personality style and your gardening style, the more feedback you'll get. Well, something else that came out in my analysis was that my garden is a reflection of my personality in that it is a source of connection and generosity. I view my garden as a gift to my community. It invites interaction and reflects my willingness to share joy and inspiration with others, as evidenced by the fact that we were just standing out in the middle of the street talking to some people who just drove by and said that they like to come by frequently just to kind of see what's going on with the garden. And I do think that that's important to me, and I think that my personality, hopefully, is welcoming, and my garden is a manifestation of that. I want it to be welcoming not only to my community, to people in my neighborhood and my extended community, gardening community, but also I want it to be welcoming to pollinators, to butterflies, to birds, to all sorts of flying wildlife. And because of that, I think that kind of welcoming nature, if you are like that, will express itself in how you garden. Do you, when people come up to you and ask you questions about your garden, do you enjoy it when you are asked to, I don't know, show your garden on a garden tour or something like that? Or are you somebody that prefers to remain private and you love your garden, but you like the quiet of the country and you like to work out in your garden spaces uninterrupted and just really get into the zen and into the flow of it? Well, what's interesting is you take some of these quizzes. Hi. Take some of these quizzes and it will give you clues as to what kind of gardening you like to do and what kind of gardening, maybe more importantly, you might want to create. Now, I cannot wait to find out what your results are. Here are mine, a little bit more in depth. I am an ENFJ-T personality. The overview is my nickname is the protagonist. My core traits are being extroverted, intuitive, feeling, judging, and turbulent. My primary focus, leading and inspiring others, fostering harmony, and building meaningful connections. Okay, I kind of think that's what we do here on the channel, or I like to think we do. The turbulent aspect, more self-critical and sensitive to stress. And I would say, oh yes, that is very true. I am very self-critical, and I don't know that I always deal with stress or specific kinds of stress very well. Garden stress I don't deal with well at all. Highly motivated to improve myself and others, emotionally responsive and reflective. However, sometimes prone to overthinking. And boy, that's the truth. I overanalyze everything in the garden and out of the garden. So what does it mean in terms of my strengths and weaknesses, particularly as it relates to the garden? Well, let's talk about a couple of things. Right now, I'm sitting on my steps, and I think they look beautiful, but they weren't perfect. They didn't really meet my visionary expectations. And so I did a bunch of things to switch this out. And by the way, I'm going to just take a moment here to thank all of you for your well wishes for Hubs, we just checked him out of the hospital a couple of hours ago. He's on the couch taking a nap right behind me. His knee is put back together, and hopefully his recovery will do well. He was glad to break out of that hospital and get home and have me start waiting on him, which I don't know is necessarily one of my good character traits, but I try. Okay, back to my steps. Potential challenges reflected in the garden. Setting unrealistically high standards for your garden, leading to stress or frustration. And I think that is so, so true. Prioritizing creating beauty for others over taking time to enjoy it yourself, and sometimes creating beauty over practicality. And I think that is so true. It's absolutely very true. And that is a big wake-up call for me to start looking at my garden with that in mind. I need to start sitting more in my garden, and I need to start creating beauty, yes, but making it more practical beauty, even more importantly. Your use of structure and symmetry mirrors your inner drive to create harmony while celebrating creativity. So I think that kind of goes along this. A lot of it, you kind of feel like they're blowing you-know-what up you-know-where a little bit with this, but nevertheless, it also gives you some of your downsides too. Another one is that I want things to happen immediately. I see potential in spaces that are often overlooked, and I like to transform them, but I have no patience and I want them to be transformed immediately. So it bothers me every time I come out here, and even though I can do it and it's very practical, see all my droopy coleus and some of my droopy dragon wing begonias, they're gonna be fine, but I want them to look great immediately. Now, I'm sure that's true of a lot of us, but I think where this is helpful information to me is sometimes instead of being patient, I'll just go ahead and rip it out and immediately put something in there that looks perfect to me. And that's not necessarily a good character trait. With people or with plants, I need to give them a chance to do what is right, to stand up and fly right, and not demand perfection from the outset. Well, one of the things I love most about approaching my garden from my favorite vantage point, which is just coming down dewy, is that this sunshine ligustrum, wow, does it show up. It is just like a spotlight on the corner. And right now I'm giving it just a little bit of a haircut because it has grown quite a bit. And these in this area, I want to not be quite so vigorous, a little bit more tightly clipped. There's that controlling aspect of my nature. But they do attract attention, and that's the other thing. I am the type of gardener, based on my personality type, that wants a garden that will attract attention, that will attract people, that will attract those inspired by creativity, and those who are lovers of beauty. And I think most of us who garden would fall into that category. So definitely I plead guilty to that. Now, something else that my type has, the protagonist type has, is a tendency sometimes to bite off more than we can chew. And I think that I think that's probably true of me sometimes, is that I do bite off more than I can chew. Though I am learning, and I think as evidence of my evolution, and look for evidence in your own life, I did have a larger garden and I traded it in for a smaller garden. Now this might still be a lot of work, but it's not as much work as my former home, and I think I'm making progress in that regard, trying to identify my limitations, not saying yes to absolutely everything, knowing judiciously when to say no, and how that impacts those around me and my garden. So all of those kinds of things, everything you do in the garden is probably an expression of some facet of your personality. Okay, now the light is kind of harsh because we got a very late start to today's Wednesday walkabout, this unusual Wednesday walkabout and talkabout, because we had to check out of the hospital after all. But I think this also speaks to trying to create this aspect right here on the corner, also speaks to another potential strength of my personality type, and I hope it's true, and that's being a good communicator. And sometimes being a good communicator through the telling of stories. And consequently, when I asked AI, how does that express itself in the garden? It's through storytelling design. And if you have followed me for any length of time on this channel, you know that there's been a through line from my former home to this home, that I moved from the fairy tale house to the cottage on the hill. And well, I think if my garden here doesn't tell a story, I don't know what does. Well, this is probably one of the most frequently asked questions we've had in the past few videos. And that is, Linda, what is this ground cover that's growing in this corner over here by the figs, by the Eugenia topiary? Basically, this, I guess, is west. It faces south and faces east. So it's this is on the west side. So this whole area right here is kind of an interesting combination of both sun and shade. And what it is, and what the keys to success are about creeping thyme. And that's what it is. And one of the keys to success is planting the right kind of thyme if you want to use it as a ground cover. And this is just your common creeping thyme. I make sure that when I am using it in this way, that it all is the same variety, because what I want is it to almost look like a lawn. I want it to be as homogeneous as possible so that it just looks like almost like a, well, herbal turf, if you will. So I've got a couple, and look at how beautiful this soil is, by the way. So I've got a couple, I mentioned this I think in our last video, a couple of potatems, pots of thyme. And these are really getting pretty large. You can tell that they don't want to come out. I have a couple of potatem, aka pots of thyme, and this is lemon thyme. And boy, my personality type loves the fact that I can clip this. The creativity of using an herb as a ground cover, though not unheard of, is not a really common practice. And it's just so beautiful and it's so sensual because it smells divine. Now, a couple of other keys to success. We think of thyme as being kind of a Mediterranean herb, and I guess indeed it is. And yes, it can survive in really dry, arid conditions. But I have found that to make it look green and lush, oh, wrong camera, to make it look green and lush, that it needs more water than you would think. So if you want it to really be a good ground cover, then I think you need to give it more water than you would normally. And even though I've got drip irrigation in here, sometimes I give it another sprinkle. The other thing that is a tremendous key to success, and that is keeping it pruned low, because I want it to be bushy, I want it to grow horizontally and not vertically, and I want it to look very crisp, very clean, and yes, maybe a weakness in my personality type, but I want it to look as perfect as possible. So sometimes I can hear some of you kind of groaning. Sometimes I will even get out my scissors, because this is not a large area, and I can use my scissors for spaces that are along the edge that are very tight, and where I want to be more exacting in my cuts. I could have done this, I guess, before I put it in place, but that's okay. So I'm letting the edges spread because I want it to spread, but I'm cutting off the top. I'm giving it a little haircut on the top. And I'm doing that to the entire surface. Now, I have in the past sometimes used a weed eater, and then I just skim the surface of it. But I have found that I'm not very good at that. and it also kind of keeps me from savoring just how beautiful it is and how lovely it smells by doing it with my scissors or just with my pruners. And so instead of using a weed eater, which I find a little bit too violent and not very serene, I am going to continue, I think, to do it this way. Now along the edges, I can use my scissors, because I think one of the reasons it looks so cool is because the edges are just so clearly defined. And this is such pleasant work for me. It smells incredible. Now I could take these clippings and bring them inside and use them in the kitchen, but typically what I do is I just get out my blower.
This is a true gardener's chore.
This is a true gardener's chore, and I can't tell you how delicious it smells. Okay, now I have my barn nail pruners, and for the larger expanses, I just skim the top, and I give it a prune just like I do my boxwood. And this keeps it growing low in more of a mat or a carpet fashion. So this doesn't take any time at all. I think it's kind of a fun thing to do. You don't see it very often. It's creative. And because I tend to be kind of a control freak, well, let's just say it scratches that itch. So I am going to break up the root ball a little bit, and I'm just planting it flush with the surface of the ground. And you asked, how do you plant in gravel? Well, this is how you plant in gravel. I just kind of push the gravel to one side. And then it just kind of mixes in with the gravel, and I like that look. So I don't worry about it too much. I can always come back in and sprinkle a little more gravel if I wanted to. Oh boy, this ground is just so succulent. It's wonderful. Okay, and now same thing here. I'm just going to give this a little haircut. I also do this, by the way, when it's still in the pot. I'll give it a haircut. Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, it's incredible.
As soon as you started cutting it,
Yeah, it is lemon to the max. Lemon to the max. Okay. And I realize that this kind of gardening, when you're down on your hands and knees with scissors, is not everyone's type of gardening. I fully understand that as I come and go out of the lens. I fully understand that, but if you're like me, if you've got this kind of personality type, then this kind of gardening might be just for you too. Well, if you guys are inside, here's an idea. Maybe you're convalescing from knee surgery, who knows? But if you're inside, can't get out and about, and you want to watch something on YouTube, then you might want to go back and look at our fall garden mix playlist, because it will give you all sorts of ideas for the coming season ahead, both inside and outside, a wide variety of different topics. I think, gosh, there may be like 54 in that playlist. I'm not really sure. Obviously, you just watch whichever ones appeal to you. But I've been doing that recently, something heretofore I have not been that interested in. But I've actually been going back and looking at some of my old videos, and even I have gotten, I think, some ideas that have been helpful to me in the month of September. So as you get to know yourself better, then you might want to check out this playlist for some ideas. So do I agree with everything in my assessment? I would say I agree with a full 85%. A couple of things that I would argue with. Well, first of all, here's another one that really is a great lesson for me, a great lesson from taking this test. That is true. And that is that they say that my personality type can sometimes procrastinate and have conflict avoidance, may prioritize harmony over addressing important problems directly. And I think for me that's true, because there's a lot of times when I find myself out in the garden just avoiding something, avoiding an email I have to write, avoiding a conversation I have to have, or a phone call I need to make. And I would rather deal with tensions in the garden sometimes than with tensions in my personal life. And I think that's probably very, very true. On the upside, one thing that it says, and if you are of this type, it may be true of you too, that I thrive on helping others grow, and I bring out the best in groups and communities, and sometimes see potential in people and situations before others do. So maybe that's true because I've had this interest in the forgotten places and forgotten things recently, untapped potential of things. So I think that was pretty spot on. Okay, but what are the things that I disagree with? Let me see, what is it right here? Let me find it. And I would encourage you to save these things, put them in your journal. Okay, here's one. Potential challenges reflected in your garden. That I lose myself in trends or others' expectations instead of staying true to your authentic vision. And I don't think that's true. I think I do stay true to my vision, sometimes even when people don't necessarily like it. And I don't think I'm very trendy. That's my question of the day for you. Do you guys think that I really follow a lot of trends, or that I stick to my vision? I don't know. I kind of argue with that a little bit. I don't think that I do. And I also don't think that I necessarily have problems saying no to things. I think my no muscle has been strengthened over time, that I may not be able to say no to a plant, but another plant in my garden, but I definitely think that I can say no to responsibilities that I don't think I have time for, or that I don't think I would do very well at. And there's a lot of things on that list. So Stuart is nodding his head. Yes, there's lots of things that people can do better than Linda can do them, and I need to delegate those kinds of things. So I don't know. I just think this is a fun exercise. We're going to be sharing other kinds of inventories, personality, interest inventories, style inventories, beauty inventories, those kinds of things that we can take down the line, I think, to look at all different facets of ourselves and our personality as we continue to try to get to know ourselves better, because I think self-knowledge is a superpower. And the more you know yourself, the more you know your strengths, the more you know your weaknesses, the more you can capitalize on the potential inside yourself. So there you go. On my final note, my final insight on this said that my garden is a living metaphor for who you are, a visionary person who blends elegance and generosity. It reflects your passion for cultivating both beauty and connections, showing that growth, whether in plants or people, comes from care, intention, and transformation. And I like to think, and from the heart. So from my heart to yours, I hope you enjoyed this kind of different, maybe a little bit weird Wednesday walkabout today, as we walk about inside ourselves and try to learn ourselves better. You guys take care.